And it looks like it's working, so hi everybody. My name is Anna Johnson at the Center for Rural Affairs, and I'm pulling up my notes so I can talk to you today about Conservation Stewardship Program. Okay, just one more quick pause before we really get going. So exciting. Okay, great. So here we go. Welcome everybody to our May 5th, 2020 Center for Rural Affairs Rural Rapport Facebook Live event. Today we're going to be talking about protecting soil and water, applying for the Conservation Stewardship Program. So apologies again for the delay. So the first thing, so before we really get started, I want to ask you to let me know that you're here by saying hello in the chat box. And I hope that I will be able to see where the chat box comes up. This is my very first Facebook Live, so we're all learning together. So yeah, put any questions into the chat box, and yeah, so we'll get started. So if you are watching this, then you probably know that know a little bit about the Center for Rural Affairs. We're a nonprofit organization based in Nebraska, and then I work out of our office in Nevada, Iowa, which is central Iowa, and we advocate for rural communities on several different fronts. And I work on our policy team, and we do agricultural policy advocacy. So that's why we're talking today about the Conservation Stewardship Program, which is a conservation program managed by the U.S. Department's Natural Resource Conservation Service. So those are a lot of words. But yeah, we're talking about conservation that's managed by the federal. So the Conservation Stewardship Program we care a lot about, and I think it's really important because farmers and ranchers kind of increase their level of confidence in their operations through 5-year contracts. And so, I'm going to be talking about that application process and what the program is and why it matters today. So again, CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program, is administered by NRCS, and it is a working lands conservation program, which is an important distinction. This is working lands conservation programs are, as you might guess, come out of the idea that farms and ranches ought to be able to raise crops and livestock while also practicing conservation. The two can go hand in hand really well if the right kind of financial and technical supports are in place. So then why is CSP valuable to you? Maybe you've been doing conservation on your operation already, but you're thinking about how you might be able to increase that, and what kind of financial and technical support could you get for that. So we know that conservation practices are always a little bit like a savings account. Investments today reap benefits tomorrow. So in the conservation world, what that might mean is building soil health today can help reduce input costs later on. And we know that times are really tough for a lot of folks in ag right now, and so investing in future conservation health can seem really tough, but that's why programs like CSP and agencies like NRCS are available to help with that kind of technical support. So the advice and the know-all, and then also financial support. So yeah, so that's why we're talking about CSP today. And final reason is the deadline to apply for CSP for this year is coming up. Application deadline for Iowa and Nebraska farmers is May 29th. So that's less than a month away. And so we really want to make sure that the word gets out. If you are interested in applying for CSP, you need to do so by the end of the month. So I know that we're in the middle of planting for a lot of folks right now, and it's a really busy time. But if there's a rainy day in the forecast, you might want to consider giving, and you haven't done so already, you might want to consider giving your local NRCS office a call to chat with them about applying to CSP. So I'll talk a little bit about also the history of it. CSP was created several years ago, and it gets modified by the Farm Bill. And so we've had a couple different farm bills since it was created. And the most recent one was passed in the end of 2018, as you might have been following. And the reason I bring it up is because this year is the first year that NRCS is rolling out the changes that were in that farm bill to CSP and other conservation programs. And so because the application process has changed a little bit and the program has changed a little bit, we're trying to get the word out about the application deadline to make sure that we want to hear from you folks out there who might be applying and hear how it's going. We want to hear how the application process goes this year, and also make sure that because the application process has shifted a little bit, we want to make sure that people know about it and get into apply. So I've been talking a lot about CSP, and so I'm going to talk through a little bit about what the application process actually looks like for farmers and ranchers who are interested in participating in this Working Lands Conservation Program. So the first thing that you do is you apply through your local NRCS office. And you find your local NRCS office by going to, there's a couple different things you can look up. You're looking at the USDA Service Center Locator, which you can find at farmers.gov/Service Center Locator. And then you put in your state and county, and they give you the phone number and address of your local office. And because of all of the coronavirus social distancing, NRCS offices are still, the folks are still working, but they're not doing in-person visits right now. So you have to give them a call, and because everybody's calling, they might not pick up right away. So be sure to leave a message with your name and your phone number and some information about why you're calling, so they can get back to you. So if you want to apply for CSP, give your local NRCS office a call and let them know. And then there are going to be 3 different things that you have to do with those, with your NRCS folks by this May 29th deadline. So the first thing is you're going to have to fill out a pretty short form called the CPA 1200, which you don't need to remember the name of it, but it's a pretty basic form for applying to any conservation programs. And it has some, basic information about your farm and, your name, your address. There's a piece about what watershed you're in. So you work with your NRCS office to complete that. And then also another thing you need in order to apply is you need to have a Farm Service Agency farm number. If you do not have one already, you might already have one, but if you don't, if you've never applied to any federal programs before, if your farm has never interacted with with USDA in some kind of official capacity, you might still need a farm number. So that it's not too hard, but it's something that takes some time. So you actually often call the same number to your local FSA office, but if you want to, it's good to look them up. You look them up at that same location that I mentioned earlier, that same link, and find your local FSA office, Farm Service Agency. And so give them a call. And so the folks there will then hook you up with the farm number. And so then you're good to go on that front. And then the third thing that you need to know in order to apply for CSP by May 29th is you also need to provide NRCS with a map of your farm. So one note also is that in order to apply for CSP and start, working on all of these, bringing more conservation practices to your operation, and enhancing your conservation efforts, you do not actually have to own your own land in order to participate in CSP as a farmer or rancher. You can rent. There's a clause about how you need to demonstrate that you can that you have control over your land for the duration of the contract, but it's not like. But you're not automatically excluded from it if you are renting. So, and if you are renting and you're interested in applying and you're having trouble, please let us know. We'd love to hear about it and see if there's any way we can help you with that. So we've talked through a little bit about what CSP is and why it exists and how it came about and why this year is important, and then also about the application process. And so the nuts and bolts of the logistics in order to apply. And so next I want to talk a little bit more about, what are the actual conservation pieces? What's the actual conservation structure? What is the conservationist trying to support? So this program helps helps farmers and ranchers, as I said, kind of add on more conservation practices and enhancements to your operations. And because every farm and ranch is a little bit different, there's a fair amount of complexity and flexibility within the program because of that. So I will try to give I'll try to give some examples about ways that the program can be used, but to know how it could work on your operation, you'll need to go talk to your local NRCS office. So again, CSP, it rewards your existing conservation and then also pays you for enhancements that you're adding to your operation over the next over the 5 years of the contract. So you work with your local NRCS office to go over what your current conservation activities are, and then also you are going to work with them to identify a couple of natural resource concerns that the current activities are addressing and the activities that you want to take on would be addressing. So this feels like a lot of jargon, but what does this really mean? We're talking about soil erosion, we're talking about water quality, we're talking about field sediment running off into waterways, we're talking about livestock pasture quality and water quality access, we're talking about wildlife habitat. Nuts and bolts of what the practices you might be doing and might be on would address. So a couple examples of some of the practices that you could take on under a CSP contract. If you go to the NRCS website, we'll drop the link in the when we post this later. I don't have it right here at my fingertips. I'm sorry. But you can look up the CSP Enhancements list to see what are the options for practices that they'll support under a CSP contract. So I'll talk a couple examples about what that could look like. So maybe you're already planting cover crops, and under your CSP contract, one of the enhancements you could choose, they use a lot of different words for conservation practices. Enhancements, they usually mean also conservation practices. So under CSP, under one enhancement/practice, you could continue planting your cover crops, but then also add on maybe a third and fourth crop into a rotation, and then be scheduling testing of soil organic matter and other soil quality indicators over the course of the CSP contract to measure the impact that the cover crops are having in the rotation and the additional crops in the third and fourth crop are having. And so all of these efforts combined are addressing soil quality resource concerns. So that could be one kind of scenario you could talk through about whether it would work for your operation in a CSP contract. Or maybe on your operation you have cattle and they access a creek for their water, which can have some water quality concerns for pathogens and sediment and erosion. And so what you would do is you could work with your maybe you're doing other conservation on your operation in other spaces, but this is one area where you'd like to maybe like to install some exclusion structures to maybe create a better scenario for your livestock to be accessing water. So you would work with your NRCS office to write up a grazing plan and plan any needed structures to limit or exclude livestock from your creek. So it's another kind of possible scenario. But in short, the full application process for applying to the CSP involves talking through with your local NRCS office about basically two things. One, the conservation that you're currently undertaking, and where in your conservation you'd like to improve your conservation. So you're talking through those two things. You do not to have ironed all of that out with your NRCS office by May 29th, but you do have to finalize it shortly thereafter in the following weeks, and your NRCS office will tell you kind of what your hard deadline is for that. So again, you don't have to have had that like really intense meeting with your NRCS office to say like I'm going to do this May 29th, but you do have to have it pretty soon. So I hope you are CSP. I'm not done talking yet. So you have if you've made it this far and you I really do think I want to enhance conservation on my operation with CSP. And you've gone to your local NRCS office and you've talked to them about your operation. You filled out your forms, you've gotten your FSA farm number, you've worked with them to set up a map, and also then what's next? So and you've set up your conservation plan and both the things that you're doing and the conservation things you want to do. You've gotten all of that done. What's next? Then once you've submitted that application, then you wait and NRCS gathers all of the applications from across the state and then compares them to each other and ranks them based on the conservation benefits and various factors. And so if your application, and then they look at how much funding they have, and they say, well, we have this much funding and it can fund this many of the top projects. And so if you fall into that top tier, then NRCS will tell you and notify you that you've qualified for a CSP contract. And so that will happen sometime in the summer. And so once that happens, then that's your opportunity to really kind of sign on the dotted line and say, yes, I do like this plan that we came up with. I still want to do it. We want to go through with it. We want to have this 5-year CSP contract. And so part of the contract, of course, one of the really crucial parts is there's a payment piece to it. So the payment that you receive, I believe it's an annual payment, and there's kind of 2 chunks of money to it. There's payment both on the number of acres that you are enrolling in the program and what kind of land use they're under. There's the payment formula also has some pieces about the number of natural resource concerns that you are meeting. So that's going back to that soil quality, water quality, wildlife habitat, livestock pasture quality, those sorts of things. The more of those you're meeting, the higher your application will rank. And then, and also the higher your payment will be. And then your payment also has a chunk that's based on the additional conservation practices that you'll be taking on in your CSP contract. And so all of that added together, that's what will come in that letter over the summer from NRCS to say if you've qualified. And then the payments come out annually. So a couple more notes about payments. There are a couple of conservation practices that newly this year, cover crops receive a slightly higher payment. Resource conserving crop rotations also receive a higher payment. Advanced grazing management, which can include management intensive, can receive a higher payment. And then comprehensive conservation planning, which can happen kind of once in a 5-year period. That's a really deep, really enhanced conservation on your entire operation on long term. It's a big job, and so that's got an additional payment associated with it. So that's a good change from this farm bill that we want to make sure folks know about. And then another thing for any folks who fall into the beginning and socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher worlds, you should know that NRCS is required to set aside 5% of CSP funds for beginning farmers and an additional 5% for socially disadvantaged farmers. So you guys have somewhat of a leg up in the application process. So I really encourage you to apply because chances are probably pretty good. And then also another point to make that's also really important to know is that there is actually a minimum payment under CSP. So if you're listening to all of this and you're like, man, this sounds like a lot of work for my operation. I have a pretty small operation. I bet I probably wouldn't, be taking on that many new conservation practices because my operation is so small. You should know that the minimum payment is $1,500, I believe, per year. And so the idea there is, if you're going to go through the work of, getting the map together with your NRCS office and, itemizing all the conservation you've done and selecting the conservation practices you'd like to do. And if your operation were, if they're worth that payment level, then maybe like the smallest operations would just not even apply because the work wouldn't be worth the payment. So that's why it's a $1,500 flat minimum. So we want to make sure it's not excluding small folks who would be interested and could benefit. Be sure to check that out. So then the last thing I'll say is if you are interested in applying for Conservation Stewardship Program, remember to call your local NRCS office. I know I've said it, but I've said it a bunch of times. And just again, they and the FSA offices are currently working remotely, and so they're trying to conduct as much business as possible remotely, by phone, by email, by video call. So they want to work with you. They just aren't able to meet in person at their offices right now. So be sure to just call and leave a message if you're interested. leave your message with your name and your number and kind of the thing that you're interested in, so that they'll get back to you. So, you know, we're all adjusting to this new reality, but you know, the NRCS offices are open for business, so definitely give them a call if you're interested. And so I'll just say again, the link for I think we've got the link copied somewhere where you can find it, the Service Center Locator. So that's how you find your local NRCS office, and there's just about one in every county, so you shouldn't have to go too far to you know, your folks aren't that far away. So that's what I had to say about signing up for the Conservation Stewardship Program. Again, the deadline to do those 3 things, get that short form filled out, make sure you have your FSA number and a map of your operation to your local NRCS office. The deadline for those 3 things to apply for CSP is May 29th in Iowa and Nebraska. And if you're not in Iowa or Nebraska, call your local office to find out what your deadline is. It's probably about May 29th or a little bit after. So be sure to get those applications in this year, if you can, around, you know, in and around the busyness of the spring. And the only other thing I'll say is we've had a lot of fun doing these Rural Rapport Facebook Live events over the last couple of weeks. I encourage you, if you're kind of interested in the material that the Center for Rural Affairs is putting up, we're doing a lot of different kinds of stuff for our newsletter, and you know, both we send an email and a paper newsletter, so you can sign up for those on our website, and you can just, you know, stay updated on all of the work that we do. So with that, I think we can open it up for questions. Oh, we've got people online. I'm so glad. Okay. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Awesome. But thanks everybody for joining. Oh my gosh, I love it. Does anybody have any other questions about kind of CSP in general, or other conservation programs? I love it. Thanks everybody for your messages. These are great. Okay. I'm happy to hang out for a minute or two if you're kind of gathering your thoughts. I know it's a lot of information pretty quickly, so I appreciate everybody logging on. It's great. Okay, well, I think we can call it good, but thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day. Sorry again for the delay. I'm like new to the Facebook Live world. Oh, thanks for the link to my profile on our website. Well, thanks everybody. Hang in there. Stay healthy. Talk soon.